This is TBC with This Week in Perspective, with me, Adam Simbe. Tanzania is 54 years old. That's the union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar. And it was celebrated with fanfare and military parade in Dodoma Jamhuri Stadium, presided over by the president, who is president of the union, John Pombe Magufuli. 50 years, of course, is a long time, and we hope that after 54 years or within 54 years, the union will have cemented itself, will have strengthened itself, and it will continue to benefit both parts of the union. However, teething problems, what they are calling Swahili carols, are still there. Now you wonder why they have not been resolved at 54. So to discuss the union today at 54 with me are Salim Hamad from Center for Foreign Studies, Kurasini, Dar es Salaam, Dr. Muhidini Shangwe from Political Science Department, University of Dar es Salaam, which means he's a political science scientist. The senior political scientist on my left is Professor Mwesiga Baregu, Santa Lucia University. The most senior journalist and columnist of the Sunday News, Tony Zakaria. Welcome, gentlemen, to the program.
Thank you.
As I said, the union is something special for Africa. And of course, I read somewhere the theme in Kiswahili, but I tried to translate it. Maybe you know it better. For this year, the theme for this year is "Our union is a treasure. Let us strengthen it, cherish it. Let us be patriotic and condone corruption and laziness for prosperity," as it were. So whether it is befitting or it's more or less, it sounds like the same theme I've heard over the years. Well, welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Professor Mwesiga.
Yes.
Baregu. The union of Tanganyika and Zanzibar is 54 years, and was 54 years last week on Thursday. Has it matured enough to withstand the turbulences that have gone with it over the years?
Well, first of all, I think to be fair, 54 years old is not a mean achievement. It's an achievement that most African countries that had tried to form unions, you can hardly now even remember the union between Ghana, Guinea, and Mali, and other countries that tried to get together. So we have every reason to celebrate that. But my own feeling is that we shouldn't just celebrate that, because I don't think we have any reason to be complacent. It is 54 years that have been reached with lots of difficulties in the union. And sometimes you got a feeling that the union was not going to last another day, and then a different day comes along, it gets breathing again, it gets some strength back, and it starts walking, but wavering in its walking.
Start to breathe again, Professor?
Yes.
It's not on life support.
Well, it has been, and on a number of occasions, I think the union has been on life support, and we'll talk about that. Let me say this, just for starters, that I have been looking around. I looked around to see how many attempts have been made to address some of what you call the chaos of the union. And it's no less than 22 commissions, committees, you name it, that have been, and all of them trying to find some kind of balance between the mainland and the islands, and Zanzibar, between Tanganyika and Zanzibar. And all of them, and I was just, I think one of the longest lasting commissions was by Shelukindo. And only the other day, I think he was reflecting in one of the newspapers about his experience, and he lamented that unfortunately the recommendations that they made have yet to be implemented. And for some reason, he has faith that the present president can implement those recommendations. But the issue is that their diagnosis of the problem, I think, is where the problem begins precisely. Because he thought that the problem lies in the cost of running the union, and on the one hand, and the benefits of the union. In other words, how do you share the benefits of being in the union, and how do you share the costs of running the union? And therefore, they recommended some kind of formula which should be implemented, and then that would balance out the interests of both sides. Unfortunately, in my reading of the thing, that's not the right diagnosis. I think you are treating symptoms rather than the disease. In my view, the union needs major surgery, not just painkillers, but major surgery, or whatever kind of treatment may be fit. Mainly because I think the problem is structural. It's, first and foremost, unions are political. They are not administrative. They are not economic. They are basically political. And it's the amount of political will that you can summon that will sustain or kill a union. And therefore, it looks to me that the issue of power, the exercise of power, is really at the bottom of these chaos. And we'll come to this point later. But when we address this issue in the Constitutional Review Commission, our diagnosis of the problem was that it wasn't so much the distribution of benefits and costs, but rather that the problem basically lay in the distribution and management of power. Who is responsible for what? How much sovereignty remains in the hands of each side? And we discovered that the union, as presently constituted, does not really have an authority of its own. We found that the union was more or less an orphan. An orphan. There is no parentage, because after reading all these studies and inquiries, we learned that in fact there is no such thing as an autonomous, independent government of the union. And that's why we recommended at that time that the long-term solution, if we are not going to, we can't assume that we're going to have another 54 years ahead of us. And if we want to even come close to thinking that way, then we have to be prepared probably to have, to change from this two-government system to three-government system. Although the debate, I think, is misplaced. It's not the number of governments. What we had intended to do in the Commission was to provide for a government that is a union government, and that does not have a conflict of interest in either side, but has an interest strictly in the union itself.
That would have meant one government.
Well, that was not possible. And I discussed that later, because when I first joined the Commission myself, yes, I was a one government person, believe it or not.
Yes.
I was a one government person. And the exposure over 2 years, 2.5 years
and travel
of the Tume, and travel and listening to Zanzibaris, listening to the people on the mainland, etc., I decided one government is not in the near future, not even in the distant future, unless that is done militarily. I mean, if we leave the union and we can say, okay, the mainland wants to annex Zanzibar, then we are in a whole different ballpark.
Salim, yeah, his views will represent those of the general populace in Zanzibar, but his views are more professional. Should we annex? Should Zanzibar be annexed?
Yeah, probably I should also admit that I have still the same idea of a one government. Because if you talk of the union, under whatever structure that was suggested by the Commission, or the existing structure, will still see these, pulls and pushes. And looking at the cost, as it is always said, both two-government system, three-government system can be costly, but one government system is not costly. But if you look at the views of many Zanzibaris, throughout the time, many commissions have been created, and every time they produce a report, it's about three governments. But I visit Zanzibar every now and then and talk to people. If you listen to their views carefully, it's not about the structure of the government. It's about what do they gain out of that structure. What do they gain in their day-to-day interactions with the rest? That is what matters a lot for them. Because at the end of the day, the union, as Professor said, is too political. Even when we united in 1964, we went directly to high politics and forgot about these low politics. Of course, I was reading one literature edited by a professor here, and he was trying to analyze different models of the union. He was talking about proximity, he was talking about passion, and so on and so forth. Probably we had passion by then, that friendship, that fraternity, that brotherhood, affection, yes. Thank you. That affection. But we think that is eroding right now. Why is it eroding? Simply because of the structure, political structure that is created by this union. So personally, I am a one-government person, but if you listen to Zanzibaris, they will say that we want three governments because of 1, 2, 3, 4, because we want to enjoy 1, 2, 3, 4. But at the end of the day, you can see that these are the ideas of politicians, because they have got power, they have got influence, and they influence the people about the three governments. But
or the two governments.
Or the two governments, yes. Because even during when the time when the professor and the commission are doing their work, there were documents circulated from almost all parties. CCM was the first one, insisting on their people to support two-government system. CUF and Chadema, they came up with their documents and say three-government system and so on and so forth. So you see, these ideas are highly politicized. But what does a common person want out of all these? Is daily bread, making sure that they do not, get into troubles when they are in search of their daily lives. Maybe there are some few examples when I say that the union is too political. Is even the way these problems of the union are being negotiated is highly at political level. You have, for example, the ministry responsible for this. You had the ministry responsible for this. Now it's a sort of a committee working under the vice president's office. But if you look at it, it's politically created. It's a political structure anyway, including only people from one party of the two sides of the union. When this time you talk of multi-party system, you have different views. You have opposition parties. You have civil society organizations. You have faith-based organizations. And these other organizations that represent the views of the people. Politicians rarely meet with their people. They only meet during elections. After that, you don't see them. But these others, civil society organizations, though they are also highly politicized, as we saw during the constitutional review bunge, in Dodoma, we saw it, that even CSOs are politicized, but at least they live closer to the people and they know what do the people need. In Zanzibar, they will talk of, the life standard. It is somehow sad that a graduate from the university employed in Zanzibar and the one employed in mainland, they, get two different salaries. And therefore, as Zanzibar ask, it is because of the union that we are facing this.
Maybe the cost of living in Zanzibar is lower.
Not necessarily. I think the cost of living in Zanzibar is high as compared to mainland currently.
Okay.
But we see these things. But again, a common person traveling now and then from Zanzibar to mainland what do they face at the port? If I go to Zanzibar, I can go with my luggage. No one will care about it. I put it on the scanner, and no dangerous materials, then I go. But if I come here only with a rucksack, they'll have to search.
From Zanzibar?
Yes, if you come from Zanzibar to mainland. You know, if you have even a kilo of sugar, it's a problem.
But it doesn't happen the other way around.
It doesn't happen the other way around.
When you're going to Zanzibar,
no,
I never had anybody.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah,
of course, I was reading a newspaper yesterday. There was a story written by Ali Saleh. I don't know if it is, exaggeration or what, but he was saying of a person who was supposed to register a marriage certificate. He had a Zanzibari marriage certificate. And of course, the authority where he was presenting that marriage certificate, they wanted the one registered by Rita. And of course, the cost of registration is 20,000. But when he presented a certificate, they said, no, this is from a foreign country. You need to pay 100,000 for it to be registered.
Where was he told about this?
I read it in the newspaper, yes. He was told here, at Rita.
A marriage
certificate, yes.
Marriage.
Yes, a marriage certificate.
And Zanzibar has its own marriage authority.
Yes, exactly.
It's not, marriage is not a
it's not a union matter.
No, it's never been.
So these are the things that a common person, is getting trouble to understand. Why does this happen? Well, this is the same country. The one who got married in Tanga will pay 20,000. The one who got married in Mwanza will pay 20,000. But why Zanzibar? Why 100,000? And you say this is a foreign country certificate. So these are the issues that are there that a common person is really troubled by, but not the structure of the union itself.
Salim, let me cut short to
yes.
to elaborate on what you say.
Okay.
But the situation is conversely the same in Zanzibar. You drive in Zanzibar, you are stopped by the traffic in Zanzibar, you show them driving license from the mainland, they tell you, we don't recognize this. We recognize our own driving license. This is from mainland.
Is that true?
Very true. And the same applies here. Normally, when I'm caught by the policeman, I provide my Zanzibar driving license. And they say, no, we don't recognize this one. Of course, there was a day when I was really angry.
At least there is reciprocity on this.
And this is what I want to say.
Negative reciprocity.
One day, a friend of mine, I was in Zanzibar, and a friend of mine from mainland was called by the police. And of course, he gave out this driving license from mainland. And the police was saying, no, we don't recognize this one. And I happened to know that particular police officer. And when I asked him about that, and he said, you know what? They do the same in mainland. So we do the same to them. So these are the issues that are happening. It is tit for tat thing. Yeah.
All right. Now, Dr. Shango,
yes.
Shango is a political scientist. What do you say to all this? I mean, it would seem, therefore, that the union has not been straight sailing, as it were, in 54 years on this.
It's always difficult to speak after my teacher and mentor, Professor Barego.
No.
But let me talk on the question whether the union has survived long enough, or rather survived the political turbulence that we have seen in the past 54 years.
Yes.
I think the mere fact that the union is still is existing, as previous speaker said, is the sign of an achievement. But I think we need to go further and look at how it has survived, the process of surviving the union. But also, we should also subject the union to different political scenarios and see whether it can survive. And here the question is... In future. We can ask ourselves, well, has it been tested? I'm talking about different political scenarios. For example, what will happen one day when CUF rules Zanzibar? The union has never been subjected
Will it be allowed to rule?
Those are the questions.
Those are the questions.
That's the question. Because for the past 54 years, it's been CCM in the mainland, CCM in Zanzibar. Oh, it was ASP in the past, and TANU. But at least you know what I'm talking about. And then So what will happen one day when you have CUF in power in Zanzibar, and the implication of that political scenario in the union? So much as
some would say that that is part of the explanation of some of the election outcomes. Even in the last election, I think it's being said that.
And it's like in every election, we are being reminded of the likelihood, or at least the different scenario that might happen in the future, and its implication to the union. It's been happening every 5 years. Every time there's an election, the union question will come up. So much as we celebrate the 54 years of the union, we as well need to ask ourselves these questions. And also, as I said, how has it survived? Part of the explanation, part of the weakness in this discourse about the union has been it's not the union right from the beginning was not people-centered in terms of being the consultation. People were not consulted.
It's high politics.
It was high politics. It was between governments. You know, it wasn't so much between the people. So all these questions, much as we're celebrating, we need to ask ourselves, and you know, if we can be able to project the future along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. Let's hope we will. Did you want to come in before?
Yes. When Shangwe says it has not been tested, I think the union has been tested. Not necessarily with the change of parties in power, but there has been so many tests where the union has really been tested. The major one being the 1984 incidents, and how Zanzibaris were, you know, at that time, very angry. But later you could see the G55 and the way it was a problem to the union, and the way the union government, you know, took control of the G55, because it was a very big test. 1990 to 2000, and Commando's regime in Zanzibar, you could see a big test of the union, and the way he wanted to change the constitution, you know.
Who is that?
Salmin Moore was the fourth phase president, you know, and the way he tried to change the constitution so as to continue to be in power, in the way he was ruling Zanzibar, you know, you could say that was a test to the union by itself. Declaring Zanzibar as a free economic zone of itself, you know, outside the, you know, jurisdiction of Tanzania, that was a test by itself. But again, you had that constitutional review, 2011, 2015. That was a big test. You could see what was happening in Zanzibar, in mainland. People saying, we don't want this union. Professor, I think you might remember what happened at Haile Selassie when those Uamisho leaders, they told their Constitutional Review Act.
The Constitutional Review Act, the first draft of the Constitutional Review Act.
I could see the late Samuel Sita, you know, in tears, because he could not expect that such a thing could happen. People are, you know, talking about it. So those are the tests.
But are those the tests in the sense that Shangwe?
Yes, they are the tests. Yes, because if you look, for example,
it looks to me you may be able to overcome a number of fevers.
Yes.
Without necessarily dying.
Yes.
But cumulatively, that process of surviving these fevers might give you a more difficult attack, and that is the test.
But while surviving, Professor, you're being treated, you're taking Panadol.
Well, that's the point. I mean, if you're taking Panadol, but basically your problem is malaria, then cumulatively, when the malaria really erupts, then it's going to be what we call it, cerebral outbreak, in which case it may be too late. So what we are saying is that it has not survived, but we are saying that the survival has been basically sometimes on life support. And what we're saying is, can we remove the necessity of occasional life support responses? And in fact, last election was a very dangerous point when the election was cancelled.
Yes.
And basically cancelled because the suspicion is that the other party had won the election. Yes. At least the perceptions exist.
Yes.
That was the real test, and it brought Zanzibar very close to a precipice, it looks to me. That, and that we have not yet quite yet overcome that, the consequences.
Professor, was it more dangerous than the 1985 one?
We will discuss that maybe later on.
That was the demise of
I think we are denying him a chance.
Union, isn't that?
Yes.
That was the demise of the
Government of National Unity. Yeah.
Yeah, the demise of the national unity, which was driving, in my view, I mean, even now.
Calm down the impasse, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Now, let's hear from Tony Zakaria.
I have an easy task, and this is to make this discussion fun. You know, if it was a marriage between a man and a wife and a woman,
Which is traditionally the case.
54 years is a long time. So this is not a mature but an old association.
If it was a marriage.
If it was a marriage. And it is a marriage. It is a political marriage.
Because I was thinking about...
What would my marriage be at 49? So it's still not mature, it's not stable, isn't that so?
It's old.
It's old.
Many marriages don't last that long.
Yeah, but
54 years, Professor gave me chance. That this marriage, just lasting for 54 years, we all agreed it is an achievement.
Yes.
Any marriage will deserve praise. But like any marriage, it has accumulated grievances. And those grievances, maybe they started small. In Nyerere's time, it was like the jewel of Africa. People looked at the union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar as something to be proud of. It was a showcase. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the foundation. Maybe the partners want to have a little bit more autonomy, freedom to make choices. And then slowly some bigger stuff, you know, that spoke of a want for sovereignty, an own flag, a national anthem, maybe even
A seat in the UN.
yeah, membership in international organizations.
to
We are thinking,
reclaim the seat.
hold on, we are partners, we are in this together. Why would you want to go your own way? We should go together as one unity. After all, we are the United Republic of Tanzania. The flag of this country is between USSR and USA. Eh? So, when it was single party, it was easy to deal with as a single party. And the issues of what happens if there is another regime comes in was not an issue. Then in 1992, we came into multi-party politics. And the question there was, okay, what if CCM won in the mainland and CAF won in Zanzibar? Who would be vice president? Because, you know, like the president of Zanzibar almost automatically became the vice president of the union. And I must say, in my time, Abu Jumbe was a very good vice president for the mainland. He was effective. He was there. We knew him. We respected him. We felt maybe he was here more than he was in Zanzibar, but that's another issue. So if CCM was the winner on one side of the aisle and CAF was the winner on the other side, it will create problem. That's why they had to change the system so that they have a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate for each party.
Running mate.
A running mate for each party. That was because to avoid this big test of you have a president maybe who is from another party, in this case CAF, and a president here who's from CCM, and they may not see eye to eye. And there is no party mechanism to put them on the same table. I think this is where politics really played a part, because Zanzibari started feeling we were appreciated, we were important, because we were always giving the vice president. Now we don't know. And so the clamor for a greater autonomy became stronger. Let us also agree that this was a marriage of convenience from the very beginning. It was a political union for defense, for economic or whatever social benefits that would accrue out of unity. At that time, the geopolitical scene with Russia and America and the UK, the Chinese maybe, Tanganyika and Zanzibar needed to be united. But we were expecting then, we started off with 5 union ministries that over time, over 50 years, should have gone to 20 and 25, or at least 10 and 15. I can tell you, I think where we are now is 3.5 ministries. It's not 5. Because defense, okay, we have, defense, and then we have home affairs. We are talking about the traffic police treating differently on the mainland and the isle. That doesn't sound like we are working on the same rules and regulations. Foreign affairs, they want to have independence, autonomy. They want to be able to be recognized by international organizations. I see ambassadors going and paying a courtesy call to the president of Zanzibar. What does that mean? We are one country with one foreign affairs ministry. If you come to finance, finance is important. Yeah. We have a minister of finance in Zanzibar. Even though we use the same currency, they have their own budget. They have their own salary scales. They pay people differently. So if you are a doctor in Zanzibar, maybe you are paid less than a doctor in the mainland. As a Zanzibari, you would feel offended. You'd feel the union has not looked for your right to be paid same for equal work.
One central bank.
Right. Now, education, I would expect it is not a union matter. Health is not a union matter. But is cancer different if it happens to a Zanzibaris? If you get diarrhea or there is an outbreak, does it affect us differently in mainland as it is in Zanzibar? Why did we need 2 separate ministries of health? In the same way with education, education is important. We should share standards. We should share teachers, even allocation of resources, so that we don't have.
Sorry, I thought higher education is a union.
It is a union matter.
Higher education, yes.
It's been added.
Higher education is here.
It wasn't there originally.
No.
Originally, no.
It was one of the adapts.
Right.
Yeah.
And has it become a grievance, one of the carols?
It has.
See, a marriage of 54 years shouldn't have irritants, because, you know, there should be tolerance and acceptance, and it is not happening. So part of the problem where we're talking of governments, if you ask the common people, you ask somebody in Kibosho, where I come from, do you like the union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar? They say, absolutely. Unity is strength. But if we give, okay, how do you benefit? Then you have him. Because I start thinking, well, were I supposed to benefit? We are brothers. We are same. So whatever happens on this side should happen on the other side, and I shouldn't have to worry about it. But then you introduce doubt, because when Zanzibaris think, are we benefiting from the union in the way we want? They start having doubts, and therefore they start feeling maybe we need to be more independent so we can look for those rights ourselves. So having one government, 2 government, 3 government will not solve the problem of the thinking of the people. Exactly. In the hearts, everybody will probably say we are better off united. But when you start looking at, as I was thinking, there was a time when I think Tanzania mainland used to subsidize electricity to Zanzibar. And you say, oh, or maybe they are getting free water. There was a time Zanzibaris were getting free water,
yes,
right? So you say,
why should we pay?
in Dodoma, in Singida, we have no water at all. And these guys are getting free water in Zanzibar. Are we in the same country?
I know. He wants to react. Time seems to be going. What, do you want to react to what?
Yes, basically what he's saying is very correct. And that are the views of the common Tanzanians throughout, whether in mainland or in Zanzibar. It's all about, that imaginary line that is, drawn by the powers whatsoever that makes people now trying to think of more as Zanzibaris or mainlanders more than Tanzanians, simply because they see that there are some rights that others are enjoying that the rest are not enjoying. When it comes to salary, a Zanzibari would always say, I'm earning less. And then comes politicians say, you are earning less simply because of the government structure. Had we have our own independence, our own autonomy, things could have been different. Because you see, we want this from, for example, the African Bank, but we don't have capacity to go there because we are not independent. We are handcuffed. Then people say, yes, because of that, then we need a three-tier government. Okay? But the number of governments really here do not matter. What matters is, the services to the people. I always say to the politicians in Zanzibar that if it happens that the government, the union government, subsidizes, for example, the salaries in Zanzibar, all these cries could end simply because you earn the same, you have the same standard of life, and so on and so forth. So for me, the structure of the government, whether 3, 4, 5, it is for politicians, but it is a burden to a common person.
Why should Tanzania mainland or Tanganyika subsidize for salaries of the workers in Zanzibar?
We are the same country.
Exactly.
We are one. We are one.
Let me
They say subsidizing. Say they both sit down together and agree. That okay,
yeah, and
pay this, and Tanganyika will pay this.
And probably
one side subsidizing.
Yeah, you can be right. You can be right here. But the thing is, once you don't have a common understanding of things, then you start having problems. Okay? If you go to other unions in the world, these issues...
There are not many though, eh?
Of course, there are not many, but they are strong anyway.
Yeah,
Yes, Professor.
Can I just butt in a little bit here,
All right,
because
yeah.
I think there is a perception here that this is just politicians who actually create the circumstances which separate the people. This question, when we dealt with it in the commission, and we had instructed each of us to say as little as possible, but basically sharpen your ears and listen, or unplug whatever former belief you had. And the idea of having a Zanzibari government, and a Tanganyika government for that matter, by the way, was not dreamed. And it surprised me, personally, myself, that in fact, there are certain historical realities that may not go away so easily, in spite of what you may wish. Tanganyika and the consciousness of the Tanganyika does exist.
Yes, very right.
And Zanzibar as a historical reality with its own roots and
It's even more.
and it does exist. And the idea that we can still have a union was basically hinging around the issue, do we have an autonomous union government, unlike the one that we have now, in which the interests of Tanganyika are sort of wrapped up with the interests of the union. And when you reach a point, it's difficult to distinguish when Tanganyika is speaking as Tanganyika or when it is actually speaking as a union authority. By union authority, we mean an authority which is able to prevail upon the Tanganyika and to prevail upon Zanzibar in balancing the interests of both. And we found, and I still believe, that kind of authority does not exist.
But from the beginning, it was never meant to be.
Yeah,
We subsumed the constitution of the new United Republic was assumed to be the one for the mainland as a stopgap measure.
Can I finish this point? Because I'm coming to the point you're making. Remember, when you started speaking here, you said the United Republic stands between the United States and USSR. Right? Remember, there is no USSR anymore now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't, that equation has changed.
Yes.
Remember also Brexit. You know, Brexit. Britain is now on its way, on the way out. So, 54 years of marriage, difficult marriages like any other marriages, but you could get a divorce at 54.
Oh,
yes.
Get divorced at 70.
Or even 70. So the point we are trying to do here, how do you avoid a possible divorce just like the Brexit has brought, or just like what used to be the Soviet Union is now Russia, and I'm sure even the flags have changed are from you. So what I'm saying is that what we're trying to do is to find some kind of architecture that will preserve what we have so far gained, consolidate that, but then respond to the challenges that are called, Cairo, okay, disturbances, annoyances, but annoyances are cumulatively because we dealing with one annoyance, and there is this tendency that we record a Cairo, there were so many Cairos, we have now reduced them down to which for me is a very mechanical thing. So let's go beyond just Cairos and look at the structure and look at what it is that is threatening the body politic that is the union.
I think the point he was making is the structure may not solve that problem because there is an inherent difficulty in people in that they are not interested in structure. They are interested in what are they getting out of the union.
And the point I'm making is that people were interested, when we talked to them as a commission, people were interested in structure, believe it or not.
Probably, Professor, that's what I was saying, that the ideas of many people during that time, they were highly politicized. That's for sure. They were highly politicized.
That's again an assumption. You know, even the commission was accused. Remember, it was accused that these cannot be the ideas of the people.
Exactly.
The commission has fed this. That is an abuse of the commission.
But for you, you know, we
did not feed people with.
Yes, for that we cannot condemn you, because at least for you, you worked with the documents. They were already existing documents. So many reports.
We read all those. When I said more than 22 commission, etc., every one of us had to read them carefully.
But it's also an assumption that people cannot think on their own.
An assumption that people cannot have ideas.
Everything they demand
all they have is just need. What do they get from it?
Have you heard of advertising?
Yes.
Political parties do very good advertising.
Exactly.
They tell you
that's for sure.
In order for you to have a good salary, in order for you to have a good education, we need to be able to negotiate separate agreements with donors, with banks, so that the money comes directly to us.
When we made our recommendations, we were very aware of that issue of political advertising. we knew it. So just don't question our judgment, please.
No.
Because it's basically, we tried very much to reflect the will of the people.
I'm told we only have 10 more minutes to go. Gentlemen. So,
it became hot.
You said it make it interesting.
Professor, you were a commissioner on Judge Warioba's Constitutional Commission. And we all followed the commission's work and the reporting and the subsequent Constitutional Assembly.
Very closely.
Very closely. Do you think the recommendations of the commission, that's Judge Warioba's commission, would have been a panacea to the problems that the chaos that the union is facing, or has been facing so far, even at 54?
That's what we just discussed. Now, of course, nobody can pretend that whatever they recommend is going to be a panacea. And in human affairs, there is no panacea. You just have to be able to respond to challenges when they occur and as they occur.
Continuously.
Continuously. That's the whole. You never have any permanent fixtures. But the issue was that this was not, by the way, the easiest of the decisions. If there was an issue in the Constitution, which, by the way, was designed to be a transformative constitution. Transformation means transforming structures of power, redistributing power, either across the people and the government, or across different branches of government. That's what it was really all about. And as I said, it was not the easiest thing, or the easiest thing to make recommendations on the union. In fact, the whole game, I think, was basically, I think, the union issue is the one that actually killed the whole process of constitution making, because after the president opened the Constituent Assembly by rebuking the commission's recommendations, then the game was set.
Yeah.
And then everybody, I don't think that the members of the Constituent Assembly, Bunge Malum, I don't think they even took time to study those recommendations, because the thing had been designed that the Tume, the commission, would be there to be able to explain why certain recommendations had been made and to give the evidence of the people. That process was never allowed to take place, and then we ended up, where are we now? Goodness knows.
Okay, my panelists, thank you very much for your contribution. Very quickly, at least one minute each. Shall we start with you, Salim?
Yes.
So, at 54, we've seen the problems, the trials and tribulations of the union. So, what do you consider to be the major challenges now and beyond 54?
For me, the major challenge of the union currently lies on the philosophy of the union itself. How do you philosophize the union? Is it a people-centered union or politically created union? If we go for people-centered union, then...
Or both.
Or both. Then we need to have a national debate on that. Very free, not time limited. Then from there, then we can say, we are now going to a union that we think can stay longer without these so many turbulences. Because the one we see currently has got so many turbulences, so many tests, simply because, it overstayed, if I can say so. Why I say overstaying? Simply because in 1964, when we united, we did not have this system of referendum. It was not there in the Bibles of politics. But then, we now have referendums. By then, you could not talk of the union, you could not question it, because the powers had decided and always had faith in the powers, so to say. But now people, the faith, legitimacy of the powers has been eroding over time, and people are now claiming their independence, their freedom. So they are now free to talk, and they have got that freedom to talk. So we need to talk about it, squarely, and come up with something that we can all agree with.
Thank you, Salim.
Yeah.
Dr. Shangwe, do we need a poll or do we need a referendum?
We do. I think.
Which one?
I would say a referendum. Because one of the problems we have, I think we haven't approached the union with open mind, right from the beginning. And in the union discourse, some of the suggestions, some of the recommendations that are coming out, it's almost like a taboo. Like, you cannot question this. Now, we all love the union, but we can certainly we should be able to question. For example, when you're talking of structure, we should be able to question the structure.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest challenge is to make the relevant the forces that led to the union. Some of them have been already outdated. We can only do that by responding to now we call them caros, like properly responding to the caros of the union and look for solution.
Professor, would it be appropriate and probably more effective to ask all Tanzanians from both parts of the union first, and it's never too late, do you want the union or you don't? If you want the union, what kind of union? Do you think this should be important?
Britain tried that, and I'm not sure that I'm not sure that they ended up with Brexit, and I'm not sure that anybody expected. But let me say this: I think we can do this two ways. One is whether or not you can open Pandora's box by saying, Bara, Tanganyika, you discuss that first. And then Zanzibar also discuss it within Zanzibar, which is what Zanzibar has been saying. Let us talk to each other first before we start talking with the mainland people. We can do it that way. But then we can also, if we want to do it, we can do it collectively. But the issue is, as long as it's the voluntary association or federation of two countries, if we want to change to a single government system, again, this can be negotiated, and the people can get involved if they only want one. And then they find a way, because if Zanzibaris who are, I think only what proportion? About 10% of, is it less than 10% of the population now? If they come out and say, we don't want it, and then here 90% say we want it, then which way do you go? So I think, let's accept one thing, that we must decide why we are coming together. If we need each other out of necessity, or whether it's out of affection, or whether it's because of the domination of one of us.
Because we marry each other.
Yeah, because if it was a forced marriage, it doesn't matter how long it has taken, but it was forced. So let's or
the jacket has become too tight.
That is, the jacket has become too tight. Take it and expand it, maybe, if you want, and make sure you don't have to throw it away.
Yeah, just hang it in the wall.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Tony, one or two.
I think the people on both sides of the union need to feel they are benefiting. It is for their benefit, whether it is social, economic, or political, whatever. And the challenge is, how do we convince them when there are differences? I believe personally that we are one country. I believe the work that was done by the commission was excellent work. People say they need the union. People say they need the union, but they didn't like the way it is. So our challenge is to change it so that it serves the needs of the people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, my panelists, for all your views. I mean, it's an interesting topic, but for 55 minutes, we couldn't cover everything at a call. But your analysis will suffice, and actually enlighten the people who are following the events of the union between the two countries. Viewers, you heard the views of my panelists here. The union is 54 years, and whether you agree or you don't, it has remained intact despite the trials and tribulation, and it is always expected that it will continue to survive, maybe beyond 54, or may not be exist beyond 54. The bottom line is the peoples of both parties need to start asking themselves some questions, and then make up their mind whether the union is for their benefit or not, which means, why was it formed? Do we need it, or we don't need it? And if we need it, what kind of structure? Time will tell. However, we congratulate the Tanzanians for reaching 54 years, which is a birthday, which was on Thursday, the 26th. That's all we have for you today. Until next Sunday at 21 hours, and on Thursday at 15 hours for the repeat program. On behalf of my panel, Salim Hamad, Dr. Muhyiddin Shangwe, Professor Monsiga Baregu, Tony Zakaria, and my TBC Television Center. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.